Hello everybody and welcome back to the 11th episode of Tides of Lore. My name is Robert Silva. I'm one half of your host team, joined as always by my good friend Tim. How you doing today, Tim?
Oh, I'm better than previous episodes because guess what, Rob?
What is it, Tim?
We're level 60, baby. We're raiding. We did MC. Yeah, we're raiding. I did MC or Molten Core last night. I got, not in this raid, but during doing some dungeons, I got the Bind on Equip purple best in slot healing belt that does extra 53 healing. Trying to sell that, get some money, because you know Paladins, man. You know how we meme how their mount is cheap?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, their epic mount, I feel like, is almost exactly the same amount of money as a regular epic mount. Dude, you have to get 6 Arcanite bars. Dude, the cooldown to make an Arcanite bar is something crazy, like 2 or 3 days.
It's like days, yeah.
You need 6 of those. They're 75 gold each. You need to pay a guy 150 gold. I think you need to pay another guy 100 gold.
Aren't you a blacksmith?
No, I'm an engineer for PvP. Yeah. So it actually costs a decent amount of gold. So I am so happy. I'm not gonna, even though I'm a healer, I don't think I'm gonna wear it. I think I'm gonna sell it and get that money.
I saw that it was a leather belt, so I thought that it was like a best in slot for like a druid.
No, the thing with Paladin is you wear whatever is best, right? So if there was a mail or a plate belt or even a cloth belt that did more healing than that, you'd wear it. It really doesn't matter what type of armor it is when you're a Paladin.
Fair enough. Plus you're a healer, you're not supposed to be getting hit anyway.
Right, and if I really want to, dude, if I throw a shield on, it's like 45% reduced damage with the shield. Without a shield, it's like 20 something. So like, just throw a shield on if you're in PvP, you know? But yeah, did that, raided. Yeah, I think that's the main what I've done. What about you, man?
I've been honestly not on a whole lot lately. I've been mostly editing the podcast. I've barely even playing games this last week. As I retrospect, I'm like, what the fuck was I doing all week?
You working hard, man. That's what you were doing.
I did work. There was also some birthday stuff that we were doing this weekend, so I didn't have too much time on my hands. But, you know, still sitting at 47 for my mage. And I'm going to get there. I'm going to actually bite down and do some dungeon stuff.
Do you want me to heal you through it? Or shit, I could probably even tank. I have some tanking gear in the bank. You want me to help you out? Let me know.
I'm probably down. I need to run Sunken Temple.
And BRD, Blackrock Depths.
Blackrock Depths, yep.
Probably like 52. Start doing that.
The world's been solid, even when I've been able to hop on and whatever I want to do, questing, AoE farming. There's not been a ton of people in my way for those, so.
No, PvP in the open world is solved now that Alterac Valley is out. I think or some is out too. I'm not sure. I think it is. Way better. Yeah. Like people minded their own business. You know?
They're good. It is funny to me because there will be times where I'm like AoE farming as a mage, and then there'll just be like some 2 random hordes that are also doing quests in the area, and if some alliance guy will come up to me and he'll be like horde, and I'm like, yeah, I understand that they're here, but I'm not going to fuck up all my AoE pulls for the next 3 hours so that we can kill these guys.
You're a civil man.
I have a purpose, and it's to level. It's not to gain honor.
Yeah, if you want honor, let's go into a BG. Although I do think world PvP is fun. I mean, why are we on a PvP server, you know? By that logic.
Well, because then I have the potential to fight people, but I don't have to fight people. Plus, I'm a lore fanatic. I'm like, why are we fighting in the first place, guys? Come on now. We have bigger problems. We have the Legion and the Old God.
Yeah, that's different expansions. But yeah.
AQ40 will come out, and yeah,
I guess.
But last episode, we discussed the remainder of Warcraft 3, as well as some of the Illidan stuff that leads into the Burning Crusade, what he's kind of doing during this time that we'll be playing Classic. And what do you remember about that episode?
I remember us talking about Illidan, Big Daddy Illidan a lot, and like how he got released, which I didn't know about that. This is why I love doing this show with you, man, because you teach me a lot about the lore. Got let out by Tyrande, of all people. Was Malfurion there? Or was it just Tyrande? So both of them were there. Wow.
Yeah.
And just like
Malfurion just shaking his head the whole time.
Which is insane that he even allowed it to happen, you know?
I mean, technically they're like co-leaders, so he doesn't have the complete say over it anyway.
But that's his brother. I think if anyone has say, it's his blood.
That's a fair point, yeah.
Him fighting, what monster or demon did he fight? And he destroyed them. Well, that's crazy because Magtheridon's pretty big.
Magtheridon doesn't die. That's why he has his own raid. But then, they go to the other Legion worlds as well.
But he did fight him off.
Yeah.
Well,
he's like, get out of the Black Temple.
Even if he died, wouldn't he just go to the Twisting Nether and he would be back later? Right? You don't truly kill a demon if you don't kill him in the Twisting Nether.
See, and this was kind of weird also, is because technically Outland is now in the Twisting Nether. So it feels like the demons that
I don't think that's
should.
Maybe. But was this on Outland? This was not Outland. This was Azeroth.
No, this was Outland. The Black Temple.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought he fought a demon in Felwood with Tyrande, and that's why they...
Oh, yeah. Well, he also fights Tichondrius, now that you mention that, who is a Dreadlord and a demon, and he's...
Was that the Felwood situation? Because that's what I was initially talking about.
Yeah, that is.
Okay. He did that. He got the Skull of Gul'dan. He became the Illidan we know, today with the wings, the horns. And just like him... creating, I don't know if you would call them friends, but or allies, but people would fight for him. Kel'Thuzad and Lady Vashj out in Outland. Just pretty much all of TBC we talked, or not all of TBC, but a lot of TBC, which is the Burning Crusade, the first expansion, yeah.
And then his actual super loyal soldiers we talked about, the Illidari, a bunch of outcast blood elves and night elves that... sought the same powers that he sought. Their conflict with Maiev, as well as some of the other denizens of Outland, as he goes on a pretty villainous streak.
Eventually his defeat.
Yeah.
Right. Is it technically the players?
It is.
I don't know.
It is technically the players.
But is that canon? Because I think, now correct me if I'm wrong here, I think Onyxia is cleared by the Horde in canon. Mm-hmm. I think... AQ might be done by the Alliance.
It is the players, yeah. I think it is technically the Alliance, but the events with Cthulhu is actually the players as well.
Right. So I wonder if it's canon if Illidan was defeated by the players. I don't know. Because Maiev was there, right? Maybe they just said it was Maiev.
Pretty sure that it was technically the players. But also, as we move into this next episode, where we're going to talk a bit, we're going to get into some of our first major storylines of the classic era. It is a bit confusing because we're going to talk about some raids and stuff and some bosses that are going to die that we definitely, as the players, were the ones that actually killed. So that'll be exciting. But yeah, in this episode, we're going to talk about the formation of the Forsaken, as well as some of the conflicts that go on in their kind of general area of the Plaguelands, as well as the major players that are going on at that time. So it's going to be a good episode. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Tides of Lore on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps the channel and ensures you won't miss a moment of this adventure. Now let's get started. We're going to start off with Sylvanas Windrunner. Like we had previously mentioned in the Arthas episode specifically, Sylvanas was a high elf of Quel'Thalas, and during her youth, she was raised alongside her two other sisters, Illyria and Varisa, who are also major players in the story, as well as their younger brother, who doesn't really come up, but I actually think is a really, really good character for her whole storyline, Lyrith.
The women are like the badasses, and the brother is like the...
He's a bard.
Yeah, he just wants to play music. That's his dream. It's just the dynamic difference. It's funny.
I do find that really interesting. I mean, even like their parents, their dad is like a diplomat who doesn't do any fighting, and their mom is the ranger general before Sylvanas. So,
is that typical in elf culture? That, I mean, there are a lot of badass women, but is it typical the women are the better fighters?
I wouldn't say that. I would just say, I mean, at least in terms of the Warcraft 3 story, it was just kind of that unit that you would summon. The Rangers were women. So it seems like when they did more stories for it, they were like, and a lot of the Rangers are women.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically for the Windrunners and Ranger General, it was actually a role that is passed down, inherited. It's not just a role that like, well, this guy's the best ranger, so he's going to be the next Ranger General. No. So like I said, Sylvanas' mother was Ranger General before she was, and it was actually supposed to be passed down to their eldest sister, Illyria. But Illyria, during the events of the Second War, decided that she didn't want that life. She didn't want a life that was already predestined for her, so she would go with some of their units to aid the Alliance during the Second War against the Horde. And that causes a kind of a big rift. It's like a lot of this story for Sylvanas in the beginning here is how their family dynamic is and how much they basically all mean to each other. And when Illyria decides to leave Quel'Thalas and leave her inheritance of this role behind, it is kind of the first fracture of this family. And Illyria leaves. She goes to aid the Alliance. She eventually meets up with Turalyon, who we mentioned back in like the 3rd episode, and they, get up to stuff beyond the Dark Portal that we'll get into. I mean, we already discussed it, but we'll get there in this episode as well. So Illyria leaves. She goes to join up with the Alliance following some of the events of the Second War, and that now leaves Sylvanas, the middle child, to be the next Ranger General. And pretty quickly she gets there because their parents also, they get summoned to Lordaeron during some sort of event. And on their way there, they get ambushed by both trolls, who are, like we mentioned, the ancient enemy of the Blood Elves and the High Elves. But also, Sylvanas, as she goes to investigate this, finds that some orcs were probably definitely partaking in this assassination of her parents. So yeah, her father and her mother die in this assassination on their way there. And that now leaves Sylvanas as Ranger General of Silvermoon and Quel'Thalas.
Is it known what clan those orcs are from?
No, but something I do find really fascinating is like when they do die, the king goes to Sylvanas and he tells her, and he's like, yeah, your mother's dead. And she doesn't believe it because she's like, this is like Larissa we're talking about. She survived, thousands of years. They sing songs about her battles. Like, I find it really hard to believe that any amount of trolls could ever show up and kill her.
But it was orcs. That's the difference.
And but that's also like, imagine getting snuck up on by orcs instead of.
No, but
orcs
orcs have insane strength, and they're pretty smart, man. Like, orcs are pretty badass.
Yeah, and I don't think I give them enough credit for that.
I'm just curious who sent out this assassination. Like, was it just they happened to meet up on them, or like, did someone pay the orcs?
I think that it was just kind of like they had met up with, like, Orgrim had met up with Zul'jin, and Zul'jin's like, this is a good opportunity to catch the High Elf slacking. Because even they do mention, they're like, this is so far from Quel'Thalas that it seems illogical that the trolls should have even been there. It just seems like at some point one of the trolls is like, these are important people, and then the orcs are like, all right, let's go get them. Let's go pack them up.
Very interesting.
So there is Sylvanas, now the leader of the Rangers of Quel'Thalas, and as she is doing some of these operations to basically avenge her family and do these hits on troll outposts and stuff like that, she comes across a human who actually manages to save Lothar Theron, who we mentioned back in the Blood Elf episode as well. And this human is a amazing archer. They're rather surprised. He's actually a soldier from Lordaeron. He is Nathanos Maris, and he will be a major player all the way up until many expansions later. But he is, just to put it plainly, he is the love interest of Sylvanas. And it kind of continues to follow a trend just because, like we kind of mentioned, Illyria has a child with Turalyon, so they got together. And
with a human.
And their younger sister, Verisa, also eventually will have children with Mage of the Kirin Tor, Rodin. And they'll have 2 children together, twins.
So all of the Windrunner women got with a human, huh?
Yep.
Every single one.
Apparently something about them humans is Apparently,
Very
something about
interesting.
those dudes that die in 80 years compared to them living for 1,000. Something
They're out
about
there
it.
for the life insurance or something, dude.
Well, it is also funny because when Sylvanas talks about Nathanos during this time period, and they do go back to Quel'Thalas, and she keeps him around she tells the other elves, she's like, I'm keeping him around because he has more information about this horde than any of us do. So that's why he's here. And that's what she tells people, but obviously, like I mentioned, they do actually begin to flourish into a relationship. And she like is always constantly talking about how ugly he is. She's like,
It doesn't get better.
Ugliest fucking human I've ever met. So she kind of likes him strictly because he doesn't treat her the way that all the other elves act. And that is something that is really appealing to her.
Was Nathanos I don't know. I think I remember hearing this from in-game. Was Nathanos the only human to get trained as like an archer through the elves?
I wouldn't say he gets trained as an archer through the elves, because even when she takes him back to Quel'Thalas when they very first meet, she takes him to a training range after they meet up with the king, and he immediately is already an amazing shot, almost as good as she is, because she's like, shoot 5 arrows at that target, and he just all 5 of them in a nice tight cluster. And she's like, that's impressive, that's really good. Like, she says it like, I've only ever seen elves that are as good as you. And then he's like, oh yeah, you think you're any better? So then she also fires 5 arrows and splits 4 of his in half with hers.
Wow. Pretty good. But did he get trained by the elves?
He did. So at this time, she kind of begins to worry that Nathanos is going to leave. And after Illyria is gone now, and after their parents are gone, she doesn't want to give up on this connection. So she actually makes him a ranger as well. And this is quite upsetting to a bunch of the other rangers like Lothramar and stuff, because they're like, but he don't have pointy ears. He's human. Regardless of that, she's like, but I'm the general, so what I say goes. So they do work together, and they're gonna need to, because now the second war will reach Silvermoon. Like we mentioned back in the 3rd episode of Tides of Lore, the Horde will siege Silvermoon for the assistance of the trolls, and along with their red dragons and stuff like that, they burn a bunch of the land and they kill a bunch of the elves. And it is at this time, after this kind of major battle, because like we mentioned, they will stop sieging Quel'Thalas and just kind of U-turn back for the capital city of Lordaeron. And it's at this time they're kind of recounting their dead. They're trying to put out all the fires from all the dragons and stuff. And she'll go back to her homestead of Windrunner Spire. And that's where she'll find their younger brother, who, for whatever reason, despite her thinking, well, he should have been in the capital city as a bard, not doing anything, he was killed as well by these orcs. And he has an axe in his back. And this is kind of like one of the most defining moments for her, where she first really just is set on a warpath against the Horde. And it is later revealed that the reason that he was even out there is because their younger sister, Varisa, had actually secretly been trying to train him to be a ranger like them. He, through his life, constantly felt like lesser than, because he's like, well, all of you fight and mom fights, but I just play music, and that doesn't really help anybody. But with that being the case, you know, she kind of just says it as he's dead, and she's like, the only thing that training gave you was the false confidence that you had any chance here. He is killed by the orcs, and this is where Sylvanas goes to like her sister, and she's like, we need to find whoever thought it was a crazy idea to train him, because he's not a warrior and he never was. And Marisa like falls to her knees and she's like, it was me, Sylvanas. I was the one that trained him. And this is where we see that second major crack in the family. And she's basically just like, get out of my sight or I'm gonna fuck you up.
Because she loved him.
Mm-hmm. He was like, throughout this entire book, Sylvanas by Christy Golden, it is made very clear that like he was her happiness. She constantly talks about how when she held him as a baby for the first time, that he was like, he gave her happiness basically. So when he dies, it really kind of turns her from a compassionate and loving person to pretty much just a straight war general. And that also is what causes the rift between her and her younger sister, Varisa. Following this, the second war will end. The Alliance will be victorious over the Horde, and the Orcs will go into the internment camps. The Alliance expedition will go through the Dark Portal and sever the connection from that side, Illyria Windrunner being one of these people. So at this point, Sylvanas thinks that Illyria is dead. And that's just kind of where we're going to leave that story for right now. This is where what will lead to the events of Arthas and the invasion of Quel'Thalas, but we do have a few other things that we need to talk about. Firstly being, there are other players that are going to come into play here. Before, in the Arthas episode, we mentioned the Plague of Undeath and Kel'Thuzad as a wizard, a human wizard of the Kirin Tor. And he would actually approach one of these really rich families in Lordaeron, the Barov family. And they kind of rule over a bunch of this land of Lordaeron, specifically out of their home base of Caer. And he basically promises them, he's like, yeah, you guys have all the money that you'll ever need, but like, you know what you don't have? Immortality. So if you allow me your guys' like service and you allow me your guys' resources, I will give you guys immortality. So them being super greedy, they're like, yeah, let's do it. And this is where they will begin to work on, in Caer, the Plague of Undeath that will eventually spread across Lordaeron and cause the events of Warcraft 3.
That's crazy because I'm doing a shit ton of Scolomancer right now. There's literally Barovs. There's like at least 2, maybe 3 of them that you kill, and they're undead. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure they're undead. They might be classified as humanoid, because I don't know if I could use exorcism on them, which is very interesting. There were other things I could use exorcism on. I'll double check on that. But I'm pretty sure they looked ghostly. But that's crazy.
And I mean, you just barely said it. This is where Caer goes from being the home base of the Barov family into what we know in modern WoW as Scolomancer, the school for training and learning about necromancy. And through this base of operations for the Cult of the Damned, they do manage to create the Plague of Undeath, which, like we mentioned, will then go on to fuck up the rest of Lordaeron and pretty much all of the Eastern Kingdoms. And that's where we're gonna move on to another major character. During the Second War, there was this paladin who was at the siege of Blackrock Mountain when Orgrim falls and when Lothar falls. And it is Alexandros Mograine. And he is a celebrated paladin. He's kind of a hero of the Second War. And during this battle, there's one of these warlocks that has this void-touched orb that he uses to cast spells. And they basically just shoot him with a bunch of ballistas and shit, and he dies, and this orb drops. And as Alexandros is picking this up, it like completely like just corrupts his arm and like does an irreparable damage to it. Because even after he drops it, the priests and the wielders of the Holy Light can't do anything to heal it. So he's like, this orb is crazy, and I think that I should put it away so that nobody gets this. So he puts it in a lockbox, and it kind of just sits there in a lockbox for the next like 19 years, 20 years, somewhere around that. And that is where it will remain while Alexandros continues to kind of move up the ranks of the Order of the Silver Hand until just prior to the Third War. And that is where them hearing about Arthas going on his crusade against the Plague and the Undeath, he meets up with a bunch of these other members of the Silver Hand in South Shore, part of the Hillsbrad foothills, and he shows them the orb. And he's like, I think that we could turn this into a weapon of the light if we can just figure out how. And all of the other people there are like, yeah, that's stupid. I think we'll just try and destroy it. So they try and use the light to destroy it, and it doesn't work. It seems to just consume all the light. But then he's right. It actually turns into this orb that is just radiating with light energy. And when he actually picks it up, it heals all the scars that it previously had put onto his arm. And with this, and after hearing about the culling of Stratholme from Sadia and Dathrohan, he's like, I'm going to take this orb to the dwarves, and I'm going to have them fashion into a weapon. And with this, we'll be able to fight off these undead. So he goes to Ironforge. He meets with King Magni Bronzebeard, who, like we mentioned, is the brother to Muradin Bronzebeard, the man who trains Arthas to very first fight. And as he arrives in Ironforge, Magni knows that Arthas is in Northrend, and he has heard that Muradin has died due to his ignorance and taking up the Blade Frostmourne. So he's like, you don't even need to... no money required. I will forge this weapon for you. So the King of the Dwarfs forges this orb into a weapon, and he says it's the greatest blade that he's ever produced. And this is where we get the legendary weapon of the Ashbringer.
Wow, I did not know anything about the orb. I have a couple questions about this orb, if you don't mind.
I should mention there's very little info on it, but yes.
Okay, well, then let's just theorize. This orb seems like it can change, and it doesn't really care if it's light or dark energy. It just is like a manifestation of whatever you give it. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Ashbringer does change at some point because of a betrayal. Right? And that it gives my theory about the orb. It's just whatever you use it for, this orb, it'll give you corresponding power, which is very interesting.
I think that's actually a really good way to put it, yeah, because it seems like when they first find it, they mention how it's like a void and it just consumes all light. So it seems like it's kind of channeling void energy. But then, you know, they imbue it with light energy and then it does that. And then as we talk about the Ashbringer, we'll talk about what energy it's going to put off next.
Yeah, we'll circle back, but I'm pretty sure, yes, stuff similar to that happens.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great way to put it. And I did try and find more info about it, but they literally just call it the orb.
The orb. What about the warlock? Was this a warlock of importance?
Nope, he's a random scrub.
So, like, can we get more of these orbs and make more of these Ashbringers? Like, I have so many questions.
I don't have any answers for that, unfortunately.
If you know the answer, you need to let us know in the comments.
Yes, if you have any info about this orb, I would love to hear it. Or even if you guys have any theories, go ahead and drop them down, what you think this orb could be or anything like that. But with that being the case, he takes the Ashbringer and he begins to head back to Lordaeron. And he does this because basically as soon as the weapon is finished, he gets the news that Arthas has returned to Lordaeron, and, well, that's a bad thing. That means that King Menethil is now dead. That means that the scourging of Lordaeron has begun. And so he quickly rushes back, and he goes to Hearthglen, where he finds his two children. One of them being his son, Darian, who's the youngest, and his older son, Renault. And he's super happy to see them there, and he's like, thank goodness you guys are okay. And they're like, yeah, we were safely here in Hearthglen thanks to this other paladin of the order, Talon Fordring, the son of Tyrion Fordring, now ruling over the land of Hearthglen. And we'll get to their story because they're basically the main portion of this with the Scarlet Crusade and stuff. But for just a brief moment, we are going to go back and talk about some of the other people that were affected by the Scourging of Lordaeron. One of them, in the chaos of all this, was trying to move through Lordaeron with her family when the Plague of Undeath comes upon them. However it manages to happen, whether it's like actual scourge or whether it's just some blight or something, all of her family dies and they come back as zombies like they do. And she, being a priestess of the light, uses her power to just destroy all of them. But doing this leaves her consumed with rage and consumed with hatred for all undead. And this character is Sally Whitemane, who will eventually go on to be a very major part of the Scarlet Crusade. But for right now, she is just a guilt-ridden, grief-overcome priest of the light.
Does she always wear no clothes, or is that after the trauma?
Actually, no. There is a Hearthstone card where it shows her as like a young girl, and she is just fully clothed, basically. Yeah.
Wow. I wonder what changed.
The writers.
She's the only Scarlet Monastery person like dressed like that. I just don't understand.
There are monks that don't wear shirts, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, but her shorts.
Yeah, I know.
Very short.
The thighs of the Inquisition. And there is one other major person that we should talk about, and that is Alonzus Fowl. He was actually the archbishop that originally kind of approached Lothar and was like, we should make paladins. And Lothar was like, I think that's a great idea. And a bunch of his disciples are who will go on to be the original 5, as well as he's one of the major figures who helps to rebuild Lordaeron following the Second War and helps to rebuild Stormwind following the Second War. The Northshire Abbey, that little cleric church that's right outside of Stormwind when you're playing classic World of Warcraft. If you start as a human, that is where you spawn. All that completely destroyed at the time. So he helps to rebuild that, as well as he builds the Cathedral of the Light in Stormwind City. And he's also the man that raises Arthas up to be a paladin. So he, just prior to the Third War, died. They don't really go into it too much, but this is in the Before the Storm novel, and he is already dead by the time that the Third War begins. But during the Third War, things that have died don't really stay that way, and he has been resurrected as a scourge. And his story kind of comes in after Arthas has begun to lose control of a bunch of the scourge, and he becomes what we'll eventually know as the Forsaken. But his major story is that he, even in undeath, does all that he can to try and help the citizens of Lordaeron in whatever way that he can. And that's actually when he comes into contact with one Calia Menethil, Arthas' older sister, who actually managed to survive the events that transpire in Lordaeron. And with her, she kind of becomes his disciple, and they work together to do what they can for the people of Lordaeron while kind of staying in hiding, because obviously Arthas doesn't have the softest spot in his heart for his family.
So there's very few undead that have free will, especially pre-Arthas, like, taking some defeats. Is he, like, pretty much the only one? Because you said in Undeath he was still trying to help. Like, he still had free will, it sounds like.
He was Scourge for a while, but he seems to be one of the first ones, along with Sylvanas, that do manage to break free from the control of the Lich King as it's beginning to falter. And that leads us right into our next point with Sylvanas Windrunner. She will kind of be the first one to break free from Arthas' control. And at that time, she will go find her body again I actually found out that they were keeping her body in Deathholm, that place where Darkon Drathier was ruling over in the Dark Scar. And that is where she finds her body once again. And she tries to assassinate Arthas, but she fails. So with that being the case, and Arthas then going to Northrend to unite with the Helm of Domination, she is kind of lost for a while. She knows that she wants to kill Arthas. She just doesn't really have the means to do it. But she did also hear that a bunch of these undead that have been breaking free of the control of Arthas are living in the remnants of Lordaeron. They're living in a portion of it that is underneath the city.
You said she found her body. Was she a wisp? What was she? Like, how did she...
She was full banshee. So it was literally just like...
banshee.
They mentioned that she is like... Her body was being kept alive through necromantic means, but her soul had been essentially ripped out of the body itself.
Okay. So she was like... Because normally banshees are like these ghost figures. So that explains why she isn't a ghost. But can she also turn into the banshee?
Yeah, you see it in the BFA trailer. She can switch back and forth from her physical form to banshee, and likewise. It's even said that while she's in her elven form, she can actually still do the banshee cry and stuff. You see this in the Sunwell comics.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
Thank you for tuning in to Tides of Lore. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow adventurers. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you. So she goes to the ruins of Lordaeron, and her having been the daughter of a super well-respected diplomat and a great fighter in her own right, she naturally kind of becomes the leader of these undead. And this is where she will give them the alias of the Forsaken. This is where she's like, we're not Scourge, we are Forsaken. Because most of these people, like all of their families, even if they did now know that they were alive again, or undead again rather, they hate them because of Arthas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is where the Forsaken are officially founded, as well as the Undercity.
So this is under Lordaeron?
Underneath Lordaeron, the capital city of Lordaeron, yep.
Did Lordaeron fall already? Because, yeah, the king died.
Oh, yeah.
How quickly did it fall?
It seems like the actual capital city is like day one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The rest of the Plaguelands and stuff like that came afterwards, but yeah, Arthas runs his blade through the king, and he's just like, this kingdom will fall. And I can assume after that point, he just had the Scourge overwhelm everyone. And without leaders and stuff, it wasn't really going to stand a chance anyway. But they do mention that even before the undead lived there, there was an Undercity. I think Ogrim Doomhammer was held here as a prisoner when he very first was taken captive after the events of the Second War.
Probably didn't look the way it does now, but
oh no,
I wonder what it looked like. I wonder.
I don't think we have any images or any super like well-defined information about it, but yeah, we know what it goes on to be. And in this Undercity, she is beginning to look for basically other people to help her lead. And with that being the case, she actually comes into contact with one of the Dreadlords, who previously was plotting to bring the Legion into the world. And she basically is like, you can work for me, or I can put you in the ground. And the Dreadlord's like, okay, I'll work for you, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And this is a Dreadlord by the name of Varimathras, who will, for a time, for a considerable amount of time in even World of Warcraft, will work with Sylvanas to kind of run the Undercity. He's kind of the guy that stands at the door, and if anyone has problems, he usually tells them to fuck off.
Dude, you see him in Classic. I remember we played Hardcore a bunch. He's just sitting there in the throne room, right next to her. Well, standing right next to her.
Yep.
Pretty crazy. It's like her right-hand man.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I'd put it. And with that, she never trusts him. She's like, I'm just always going to keep an eye on you. I'm never going to actually trust you because you're a Dreadlord. But while you can give me help, I'll do that. And it's at this time that one of these people does come to her. One of these freshly made undead comes to her, and Varimathras is very first like, fuck off. But he does manage to kind of get past him and meet with Sylvanas. And he's like, hey, I used to be a super well-renowned alchemist, and I have a passion for understanding the unknown. This is a man by the name of Putris. And she is like, okay, what do you want? And he's like, I think that I can refine this plague of undeath, this blight, into a weapon that can hurt both the living, obviously, but also I think I can modify it so it will kill the dead, the Scourge. And hearing this, she's like, okay, I will make you our grand apothecary and give you any of the resources that you need as long as you can do that for me. And that is what his story is, as he works on that for the next expansion and a half. Yeah.
The butterfly effect from doing this is insane. I mean, I'm not going to go too much into it because I don't want to spoil. But even not just in Wrath of the Lich King, if we think of BFA, I can think of many times this what do they call it?
The Blight.
The Blight, how much it destroys throughout all of World of Warcraft history. But even in the modern expansions, dude, Undercity is still non-habitable. Yeah. Not even the undead can live there. So it's crazy, the butterfly effect of giving him this position.
Mm-hmm. So he now founds this group, Royal Apothecary Society, and they work in the Undercity to accomplish this goal. They do some pretty fucked up stuff. Like, Sylvanas is like, I'll let you experiment on the Forsaken, but as long as they're criminals. And Putris is like, yeah, they're definitely criminals, for sure. And she's like, I'm not going to ask any more questions about that.
That's sketch, dude. So already his morals, you can see it's not very good, huh?
Yeah, it's already super questionable. But back with Alexandros Mograine and the Ashbringer. This is I believe a few years later, following, the founding of Undercity and all this, and Arthas now being united with the Helm of Domination off in Northrend. He is like, we should see if we can take back Stratholme. So him, alongside his two sons, who have now also joined the Order of the Silver Hand, and his trusted companion, Sadian Datherhan, one of the first paladins, they lead this charge into this undead infested city. And they say that the city is still burning, like it's unnaturally on fire forever. And as they go in there, it's a trap. And they get set on by the undead from all sides. And in this time, Morgraine's younger son, Darian, gets basically like hit with a blast by some sort of magical necromantic attack and is severely injured. And while they're all kind of paying attention to that, Sadie and Datherhan get separated from the rest of his group. And that's when, just to put it plainly, he is killed by another Dreadlord. And this Dreadlord goes by the name of Balnazar. And he doesn't just kill Sadian, he actually kills him, and then he begins to puppeteer his body from inside. So now his goal is to kind of, because remember that the Legion, which is who the Dreadlords actually serve, their goal is to still stop the Scourge, because the Scourge has gone off the path that they've set. So he begins to make extra efforts that the humans and stuff like that will continue to purge the Scourge, as well as pretty much any other undead. So from within, he begins to influence the Order of the Silver Hand to become way more zealous towards the undead. And he isn't quite a leader, because technically Alexandros is now like the general over everybody, because him wielding the Ashbringer, I should mention, Ashbringer, anytime it comes into contact with an undead being, they just immediately turn to dust. So with this amazing weapon, he is just slaughtering through the ranks of the Scourge whenever they come into contact with him. And with that being the case, they're like, you're the leader now. We trust you.
Who's the last boss in Stratholm 1? Is it this guy?
It is Sadie and Datherhan. Yep.
And he literally turns in to the Dreadlord. Is it Balnazar? And then I'm pretty sure you defeat him in Stratholm Live.
That is true. Yeah.
But that's him, huh? I always wondered, why are there these Scarlets in the city still, next to these undead? And that's the reason, huh?
Yep. Because they're being manipulated by Dreadlords to go through with what they do. They don't necessarily, they don't know that they're working for the Dreadlords, or that they're basically in collusion with the Legion, but that is why, yeah. To quickly touch back with Sylvanas is also now looking for even more allies to strengthen her order, because the humans of this paladin order are becoming way more zealous and trying to kill her more and more. So she's like, you know who I really liked back when I was a living person? Nathanos.
Right.
So she goes and she looks around his old stead, the Maris stead, and she does find him. He's actually been killed and he's been turned into Scourge. But she's like, I can fix him. And
oh, yeah.
Yeah, and she does. She actually does. I mean, it takes a lot of attempts and it takes a lot of effort, but she basically, through appealing to Nathanos' humanity and sharing about their history and the love that they once had, he slowly turns from a Scourge into a Forsaken. And this is when he'll be renamed from Nathanos Maris to Nathanos Blightcaller.
It's crazy, dude. He's in Classic, dude. I didn't know that. He's actually in Classic.
Quest giver, yeah.
You even interact with him on the Alliance. Have you done this quest?
I believe very briefly. Actually, yeah, no, I've done it very briefly.
So you hear a rumor about it, and they go send you on a reconnaissance mission. You go and you see these dead Alliance soldiers leading up to his house in the Eastern Plaguelands. And then there he is, Nathanos Blightcaller. So much health, like raid boss amount of health, with demon dogs next to him, plague hounds. And you go back to Stormwind, you tell them, and then they give you the quest to go kill him. Dude, I tried 3-man-ing it, and I don't know if, they were just bad or what. He whooped us. Like, yeah. But it's crazy to see him in game in Classic. I didn't know he was in Classic. Of course, he's in retail.
Him in that exact spot comes back into play way later down the line too.
Oh, dude, he's a world boss.
Yeah.
I forget. Was it
the pre-patch to Shadowlands?
Yeah. I remember beating his ass. But in Classic, he beats your ass.
Oh yeah. And that is because he is Like I said, he's an amazing archer, and now he doesn't even need sleep or food or any of that shit. And he is the champion of the Forsaken. That is what Sylvanas makes him, her champion. Back with the Order of the Silver Hand, you have Nathanos Mograine, Alexandros' eldest son. And he is now being manipulated by Sadean, who's, like we said, taken over by a Dreadlord. He got really sick somehow, and Sadean's like looking after him, but he's also doing this, I believe he like purposefully makes him sick so that he can isolate him from his brother and from his father. And he tells him like, yeah, isn't it really fucked up how your dad like likes your younger brother way more than you? And in all fairness, it's kind of true. Alexandros is really harsh on his older son, but he does treat his younger son a lot better. So by playing on this resentment towards his father, he begins to kind of convince him like, hey, if you maybe got rid of your dad, you would rise up in the ranks and you would have such a better life. And through enough manipulation of this, he does manage to convince him to betray his father. And
Crazy.
Alexandros is then told, like, they captured your youngest son, Darian, and they have the Scourge has captured your youngest son, and they have him over in this city. And with High Inquisitor Fairbanks, they go to try and save Darian when they come into an ambush by the Scourge. And they're completely surrounded. And Alexandros, busts out the Ashbringer and just starts obliterating wave after wave of these undead. And he actually manages to kill pretty much all of them. And just as you think like the battle's going to turn in his favor, he gets like picked up by an abomination and he drops the Ashbringer. But he calls upon the light and just like a radiant beam fucking smokes this abomination. But unfortunately, as he's like, yeah, no, none of you undead could stop me. Even if you sent another 100 more after me, I could take you. And his son picks up the Ashbringer and drives it through his back. He dies, and this not only kills him, but as the Ashbringer is ran through him, it turns it from this radiant holy weapon of like silver and light to a black weapon that radiates death.
I'm telling you, it's that orb. It's that orb, and it sucks on your intentions or something, dude. And it'll either be, I don't know if it could be something other than chaos or light. Maybe it could. Maybe you use it for like fel, and it turns into fel. Who knows? All right.
But for now, it seems to radiate like necromantic energy. And with that being the case,
The corrupted Ashbringer, huh?
The corrupted Ashbringer, yeah.
Yeah.
And so Renault, being like, oh fuck, I gotta get out of here. He runs back to the Silver Hand, and he tells them, he's like, yeah, the Scourge got Alexandros. I don't know how that happened. That just is crazy. But Fairbanks, the High Inquisitor that was with them, shows back up. He was actually hiding under a bunch of these undead bodies, and he tells them, he's like, no, I watched him run the blade through his father's back. And Sadean, being kind of the leader at this point of the order, is like, clearly you're traumatized and don't know what you saw. And also, you're risking everyone here with the plague of undeath, because that's just kind of the story he spins. He's like, you need to be put in quarantine. And this is how he falsely imprisons him. And this is the beginning of the schism of the Silver Hand. This is where it splits from one order into two. It now has Renault, who has betrayed his father, kind of along with Sadean Datherhan, now leading this group of paladins that are super zealous towards the undead and follow his word. And they form the Scarlet Crusade. And the others that are not convinced by what has happened and see them becoming super zealous, they leave and they form the Argent Dawn.
Oh, big players in Wrath. A question about the Ashbringer.
Yes.
After it was used to kill Alexandros, who kept it? Or was it left? Or, because I know you find it in the game in Naxxramas from the Four Horsemen fight.
It was left in his chest, literally. And the person that next finds Alexandros is the Lich Kel'Thuzad, Arthas's right-hand man. So he raises Alexandros as the Death Knight.
Is he a Four Horseman?
He is one of the Four Horsemen. So he is the reason that he is wielding it.
That makes sense.
Yep. So he takes him back to his fortress of Naxxramas, and he is part of these 4 super elite Death Knights. Darian, the youngest son of Alexandros now, who decided to leave with the Argent Dawn, but not quite join them because his faith in the light has kind of been shattered. He is visited by a troll by the name of Zabra Hex, who is previously, when the Silver Hand had gone to this old monastery of the light in Tirisfal Glades, he was there reading the books, and they capture him, and they're gonna, kill them because half these people were still Scarlet Crusade members. Alexandros is like, if you're telling the truth that you're truly like an acolyte of the light, I will know because the light is with me. And he kind of reads his mind in a way, and he's like, yeah, no, this guy's telling the truth. He's just here to study. So he lets him live and he lets him go. And this troll approaches Darian about the fact that he's like, I feel this connection with the light and with your father still. He's not entirely gone from this world. So we should come up with some sort of plan to help him out. And this is kind of what brings Darian into the Argent Dawn. And with that, they know that his soul is still lingering somewhere in the world, and eventually they do kind of decipher that it is in the floating undead necropolis of Naxxramas. To quickly touch on the Scarlet Crusade before we get into the story of Naxxramas, there is a girl who is born into this, just going to call it a cult because that's what it is, and she is the daughter of the High Priestess Benedictus Voss. And he basically is like, you don't get to have a childhood. Your childhood is going to be one that is, you're going to learn how to master stealth and sorcery and martial arts and anything else that you can to be a weapon against the undead. And this character is Lillian Voss, who will come back into play a bit further in the story. But for right now, she is a follower of the Scarlet Crusade, kind of an assassin.
She is pretty powerful.
Oh, yeah. Even when you get to her story, there's times where she'll just like, I'm in prison, and then they'll be like, we're going to kill you. And she's like, no. And then she kills them instead from inside her prison.
Yeah, she's crazy. Necromancy? Or what did you say? The dark arts she was studying too?
She was just studying stealth, sorcery. Like, she's kind of like a
sorcery
spellcaster in a way as well. It seems like the Scarlet Crusade also begins to tap into the arcane magics and stuff like that as well.
I just don't...
Maybe even shadow magic.
Remember seeing her use any... obviously stealth. She seems like a rogue. I haven't seen her do other things other than really be a rogue that I can remember at least.
Well, even in that story I was talking about where she's in a cage and they're like, we're going to kill you, she like turns into like a shadowy figure and teleports out and kills him and then teleports back into her cage.
Yeah, that's just shadow step. Rogues have that.
Fair enough. But he also, I believe, has mana in the actual game, so I don't know. I don't know all the details of that, but she's also not, like I said, a super big player until later on. But there is the other super big player that we briefly mentioned earlier, Sally Whitemane. And with High Inquisitor Fairbanks either being killed by the Scarlet Crusade or actually having contracted the Plague of Undeath, he dies. So that position is now open. And with her being super zealous, giving all these fiery sermons, they're like, you'd make a really good next High Inquisitor. So that is what she has made. She's made the next High Inquisitor of the Scarlet Crusade. As well as following this, Renault is also ascended to the rank of Scarlet Commander. They did actually follow through with their promise of, if you kill your father, we'll basically raise your rank. And with that, he's kind of completely overcome by corruption, his rampant zealotry, and just a desire to eradicate the undead with the Scarlet Crusade. And that's kind of their whole thing. They kill all the undead, but they also begin to kill everybody, even humans, that they see that don't follow their path.
Yeah, they start going crazy. Do you think this is influenced by the Dreadlord?
Absolutely.
Or... Okay. Because he just wants, I guess, humans and undead to be wiped out.
He also is losing his mind because of what he did to his father. He's having these nightmares all the time, and he even goes on, like, there's like this point where he's like losing it so badly he goes to his mother's gravestone and he's like, all my family is dead, and he just smashes his mother's gravestone into pieces.
Oh Lord.
Yeah. So he's not quite all there anymore. But with this being the case, Darien is being guided by Argent Dawn, who I should mention, the Argent Dawn isn't just humans. They're now orcs, they're now blood elves, they're now trolls and all sorts of people that the Scarlet Crusade would have never let into the Paladin Order. So with this, he makes a small strike team to go and infiltrate Naxxramas. And flying up there with some griffins, they make their way in, and they battle the people that you would see if you were to ever run the raid. They fight the Nerubians, they fight the undead, and he actually even kills Grobulus and Thaddeus in this comic series. So it's kind of the story at this point. They replaced the actual players with these named characters, at least in terms of the canon lore.
You said the orcs, trolls, did they train them how to be paladin?
I think it was just kind of that they also had a connection to the light. I don't like, because there's like a dwarf in there as well, and the dwarf, they all seem to just kind of be warriors, not necessarily paladins as well.
Oh, okay.
But they fight through Naxxramas, and eventually they do reach the top of it, where they come face to face with the Four Horsemen, these super powerful Death Knights, including Darien's father, Alexandros, who has completely been overtaken by the Scourge. There's a scene that they show him where Kel'Thuzad tortures Alexandros, basically painting all the memories that he has. He has like this memory where when Darien was born and he wasn't breathing, he would run him over to this river of super cold water, and by basically shocking him into consciousness, make him breathe instead of being stillborn. But even in this memory now, like, these undead hands grab the baby and drag it into the water. And Kel'Thuzad's like, who loves you? And eventually Alexandros' mind is completely snapped, and he's just like, no one loves me.
Wow.
So Alexandros fights with Darien, and they also, unfortunately, are betrayed. They had one of these mages that was with them that was kind of like a mystery. He like covered his face, and he doesn't talk to anyone. His name is Castellan, and he is part of this strike team, and he betrays the group. And despite this betrayal, he is seemingly killed. Regardless, they are now facing overwhelming odds, and all of the party, with the exception of Darien, is killed. And as he's fighting his father, he kind of accidentally kills him. He like is just kind of blindly swinging his sword when he runs it through Alexandros' neck, and Alexandros drops the Ashbringer, at which point the blade whispers to Darien and says, pick me up, let's get out of here. And he does. He picks up the blade, seeing no hope for winning this now. He flees Naxxramas, and the blade kind of guides him all the way out. And at first he's kind of thinking like, this is the light that's guiding me. And he goes through a portal, and he manages to escape. Just to briefly touch on what Castellan's true goal was, where we find out that Castellan was actually one of the Forsaken, who had been sent by Grand Apothecary Putris with the goal of getting these special ingredients from Naxxramas so that they can continue working on the plague. And he delivers these supplies to him and quite literally disappears from the story forever.
That's the last you hear.
That's the last you hear of him. There was a Blizzard employee who commented, who was like, we've definitely not seen the last of him. I don't know, man. It sure seems like it.
I mean, who knows? We got so many expansions. It seems like they won't stop,
With this being the case, back at the Scarlet Monastery, you have Renault, who is, like I said, losing his mind due to the guilt, due to the lack of sleep, and due to the Dreadlords manipulating him. And he is just like on edge all the time. So when Darien shows up to him, having been guided to the Scarlet Monastery by the corrupted Ashbringer, he's like, you're a ghost from my past trying to haunt me. Why are you here? And he like beats the shit out of him immediately. Like, he just immediately attacks him. And Darien has no idea what's going on, because he doesn't even truly know the details of what he did to Alexandros. So he's just like, why are you doing this to me? And that is when he drops the Ashbringer, and the soul of Alexandros pops out of it, and is just like, the light sees through all your sins, and you're done, son. And the spirit picks up the Ashbringer and decapitates his eldest son, Renault.
What?
Yeah. Again, this is kind of changing up what we actually do in the classic experience, because Renault is the guy that is with Sally Whitemane when you go into the cathedral of the Scarlet Monastery. She's the guy that he resurrects, and that, you fight the 2 bosses at one time. So that's a little bit of a change from the story.
Well, also you get the corrupted Ashbringer from the 4 Horsemen fight. So it's like, because right now after that, where's the Ashbringer go? Do you know, or does it say?
Well, and then either Darian was knocked unconscious, or he just kind of falls asleep or some shit from the shock or some shit of it happening, and he has a dream where he's visited by the form of High Inquisitor Fairbanks, the guy who was taken away during, Renault's betrayal. And Fairbanks and him are sitting on this hillside watching the sun, and he's just like, tells him, he's like, yeah, your dad, or the spirit killed him because he betrayed your father, and you need to find a way to purify this weapon. And he's like, I know of a guy who could probably help you. There's this exiled paladin in the Plaguelands by the name of Tyrion Fordring who might be able to help you out. And he tells him where he's at. And then he's just like, be honest with me, Fairbanks. I'm dreaming, right? And he's like, yeah, the light comes to us in mysterious ways. And then he dissipates and disappears. And that's when he wakes up on the floor of the Scarlet Monastery. He's alone, and he has the corrupted Ashbringer still. And he's like, all right, I'm going to go find Tyrion. So he takes his blade, steals a horse, and gets out of there. And that is when he does find Tyrion. He's hiding out in the Plaguelands, and he comes up to him, and as he's coming through the door, he's like, Tyrion, are you there? And Tyrion basically holds his hammer up to his head, and he's like, you better not be a bad person, because I'll brain you. And he just kind of tells him, he's like, no, I'm the son of Alexandros, and I was told to seek your guidance. And Tyrion's like, okay, sure, I'll help you out. So he tells him, like, they sit and talk for a while, and he tells him about how he was exiled, but also he mentions to him, he's like, I think that the only thing that could undo such an act of evil would be an act of pure love and an act of pure good. So he tells him, I don't know if anything on Azeroth that has ever happened like that, but if you figure it out, best of luck to you. Also, Light's Hope Chapel's under attack, so you might want to go help out your friends. And he's like, you should come with me. You should fight for a cause that's bigger than yourself again. And Tyrion's just like, no, I like my exiles. I've lost everything already, and I don't plan to lose anything more. So, good luck. And Darian is just like, okay. So he rushes over to Light's Hope Chapel, and he meets up with the Argent Dawn that are there. And they tell him, yeah, a massive army of Scourge led by Kel'Thuzad are on the way right now. They say that there are as many of them as there are blades of grass in a field. So we're going to need all the help we can get, and we're super happy you're here. We got one night before they arrive. And on the next morning, the undead arrive, and Kel'Thuzad's in the back line, like, talking hella shit. And the undead charge them. And while they do the best that they can to fight all these undead, there is always that downside that they're living. So anytime one of them dies, even if they're the best soldier in the world, they now fight for the Scourge when they get resurrected. So they are fighting a losing battle. And that is when Tyrion shows up. He comes rushing in and kind of rallies the troops of the Argent Dawn, because they're like, oh my gosh, this is one of the first 5. And with that, they do manage to hold the line a bit, but it is still a dire battle. And as the Scourge are once again beginning to overwhelm them, Darian hears the words that Tyrion had told him about. Basically, here's, if there's anything that can undo all that's happened, it is an act of pure love. So he takes the Ashbringer during this battle. And I should also mention that the reason that they're even fighting so hard for this chapel is because underneath it, there's 1,000 of the greatest warriors that Lordaeron has ever had, right? It's like this grand crypt. And with that being the case, if the undead get to it, I mean, we're looking at a lot of Death Knights that are going to be a big problem. So he takes the Ashbringer And as he professes his love for his father, he runs the blade through his own chest.
Wow.
And at which point the Ashbringer lets out a massive burst of light, as well as being fortified by all of the souls that are underneath the chapel. It just, in one massive radiant beam of light that falls from the sky, kills all of the scourge that are sieging the Light's Hope Chapel. And he obviously dies from this, but the reason that it even kind of worked was because he is in this moment sacrificing his own soul to the corrupted Ashbringer and freeing Alexandros from it.
That's a big bet, right? He didn't know that would happen.
I agree. Yeah. No. Imagine he just dies and they're like, this guy's a fucking idiot.
Like, he was really hoping that would work.
But yeah, so with that being the case, all of the undead die with the exception of Kel'Thuzad, who can't really die because he's a lich and you can only kill him by destroying the phylactery. But he no longer has the numbers to overwhelm Light's Hope Chapel. But even with that, he sees this as a win. He's like, it was a win for me if I got to wipe out the Mograine bloodline. And there is also the fact that he resurrects Darian now as a new Death Knight. And as he pulls the still corrupted Ashbringer from his chest, he is like, and I still have a great champion. And that's kind of Kel'Thuzad's final, like, haha at this moment.
It didn't purify the Ashbringer?
It did not purify the Ashbringer.
What?
And I was surprised, because I thought that this was the moment it happens. Nope. Not Uther, but Tyrion, and he has a storyline in Wrath of the Lich King where it actually does. But yes.
So wait, it exploded of light, but it's still corrupted.
If you want my opinion, I think this should have been the act that purified the Ashbringer.
Yeah.
I think that would have made a way better storyline than what we will eventually get in Wrath of the Lich King. But I guess they still needed a reason for Darian to be leading the Death Knights when you actually come to the start of Wrath of the Lich King. There is also like another storyline in Classic where you do have like a corrupted Ashbringer quest line, but that has been made non-canon now. So
there you go.
Yep. And that is all the story that we have for right now for this episode. There is a little bit more that we can talk about with Tyrion and stuff like that leading into Classic, and his son Talon, but we'll talk a bit more about that later as we kind of talk about the complete undoing of the Scarlet Crusade.
Yeah, because they go to North, or they're called something else.
They're the Scarlet Onslaught at that point, but
yeah.
Same dudes. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. Your guys' support truly means the world to us. If you're interested in hearing more, we have our full show on YouTube and Spotify, new episodes dropping every Tuesday. I also want to take this moment to give a special thank you to Fantasy Lo-Fi for providing the music for this episode. You can find them on YouTube at Fantasy Lo-Fi or on Spotify under Bits and Hits. Be sure to show them some love as their music does truly bring this journey to life. Once again, thank you for joining us on Tides of Lore, and we will see you next week.